Before we start, I would like to draw your attention to the disclaimer that's on the screen and just highlight that what Erin and I will discuss and share today is of general advice only. Before making any decisions based on this presentation, you should assess your own circumstances or consult a financial planner. We'll also be going through some case studies today of clients, and to protect those identities of those clients, we have changed their names and some of those details just for that extra level of privacy. I think that's probably a good way to lead into the next case study I'd love to chat about, who I'm going to call John and Annie. And it was a similar situation, wasn't it? That John was a manual worker and he was starting to feel that his body wouldn't last until he got to retirement age. And, in their early 60s, that date is coming up very fast. And to think that you might not make it that far is obviously extremely, you get very fearful and anxious. How were they? What was their story when they came to see you?
Yeah, so when they first came to see me, they were in their early 60s, working full time. Um, Annie worked in a bank, John in that manual labour job. So John was really concerned that they'd have to keep working, until their late 60s, age pension age, and that his body just wasn't going to handle that length of work. So they were really worried that they weren't going to be able to achieve their retirement goals, which was for John to finish up a little bit earlier, given the impact his work was having on his body.
What was their financial position like when they came to see you, Erin?
Yeah, so they did own their own home. They both worked full time. They paid their mortgage off, and what they'd done is start putting the money they were putting into the home loan into a bank account. So they had some savings in their bank account. They both had multiple superannuation funds, no credit card debt, which was good. And they'd been to some seminars and they'd got some information. As I mentioned, Annie worked at the bank, so she'd been to a lot of seminars. She knew a little bit about some of the superannuation rules, but they were really confused about how it applied to their situation.
And they are looking at this here. It's great. They're living probably the role model that we want. They've paid down their home. They're saving properly. They have no credit card debts. But you know they're obviously very unsure whether or not they can take that next step. What did you do? How did you sort of talk them through their position?
Yeah, so there were a few things we did just to improve their financial position. So, some strategies we implemented to improve the situation. Firstly, tidied up their superannuation funds. So, that saved them a few thousand in fees per annum. We had a real trade off discussion. So, again, that theme's reoccurring. Trade off discussions are so important when it comes to retirement planning, prioritizing when they wanted to retire versus other things like how many overseas trips they want to do, what level of renovations they want to do, number of car changeovers. And lastly, we got their cash working for them or sitting in the bank. We got that cash working for them by making some superannuation contributions, and that improved their position tax effectively. Also started putting extra contributions into superannuation in a tax effective way just to save them tax and build up what they had for retirement.
What was the net position? What happened in the end?
Yeah, so it was a really good outcome for them. So as I mentioned, they did think they'd have to work until their late 60s, age pension age. They were really worried. When we looked at implementing those strategies and did the projections and had those trade-off discussions, they were able to retire at age 65, which for John was just a really wonderful
Two, three
outcome.
years earlier than they
Yeah,
thought?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. So he was really pleased with that because 2 years was achievable to him. 4 years was looking like a really hard slog. So they were very pleased with that outcome and just feeling more optimistic and confident about the future.
And it's really interesting, and, in this situation, they had done, like I said, everything, tried to do everything right to get to that position, yet still didn't feel that they were in a position to be able to retire earlier. And the power of being in control now for John is to say, I can now stop because I'm going to be okay.
Mm.
So I think, Erin, out of both, these case studies you've shared today, is that there are some real lessons to be taken out of this because whilst on the surface, and please, apologize for how I'm going to say this to you, but on the surface, it seems like this is all so simple. And yet, in reality, if it was so simple, we'd all know what to do. We'd all be able to sort of sort this out ourselves. And that, by speaking to you, being able to get those, your clients to draw out those goals and focus on them, and then really getting them to look at their money habits. How are they spending their money? The momentum of how you spend is either going to work for you or against you. It's the good and the evil. And with Mary, while she wasn't doing anything really wrong because she was sort of spending a little too much and not preparing for the future, there were going to be consequences down the path to that lifestyle. And then with John and Annie, they had sort of made some sacrifices early in life, paying down their mortgage, but just weren't aware if they could retire because there is just so much noise out there, so much confusion. But by coming to see you, I think, you're able to sort of bring together that goals. And like I said, whilst it seems simple on the surface, it really does balance on having these conversations with someone like yourself.
That's right, yeah. So getting that advice that's personalized and it is goals based. So we do look at the goals and prioritize those so that we can drill down what's your number one goal and help them achieve it. And in both cases, owning her own home for Mary, retiring early for John and Annie, they were their number one goals. So getting them towards those goals allow them to feel really confident and empowered for the future. So that was a great outcome. And a lot of the changes they do need to make when people come to get advice, they are behavioural changes. So having someone coach you on those behaviours really helps people stay on track and be accountable as well.
Yeah, and trade-offs. It's all a trade-off, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
So
Sorry, you
we
go.
can achieve what we want to achieve, but we do need to make some sacrifices, look at what's the priority, and what we can trade off, whether we retire a bit earlier, go on holidays a little bit less frequently. Those kind of decisions we all have to do.
Yeah, and again, I'm sure Mary, John, and Annie are grateful that you were able to, sit with them and help work through what those priorities were, so that then those trade-offs become something that they're really empowered to make those choices of what that future is going to look like. Erin, thank you so much for sharing those stories with me. I know all three are now very happily retired and living their best lives thanks to you, but thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kim.